Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And my guest today is Ragini Michaels. I hope I got that right.
Perfect.
Very good. Um, and I'm glad that you're here. And so tell us a little
Thank
bit
you.
about who you are and the things that kind of captures your imagination or the time that you give to yourself every day. What's up with you?
Oh my goodness. Well, that's a big question, isn't it, in
Yeah,
today's world?
yeah, it is.
Um, well, let's see. I've been in private practice both as a behavioral change specialist using NLP and Ericksonian hypnosis for over 4 decades. And I'm also a certified trainer of neuro-linguistic programming. And I've taught that. I was so lucky because it took me around the world teaching people. So I got to see a lot of Europe, and I taught in an ashram in India for a while, and on and off for a number of years. I would say the two primary things that are most important to me in my life today is my inner life, my spiritual life, whatever you want to call that, and sharing what I have learned with people about how to easier navigate today's crazy, fast changing, chaotic world by learning a bit more about paradox and how to live in a world of opposites. And that's kind of been my sort of my vision on the horizon for, gosh, 35 years. I've been exploring that as much in depth and inner and outer as I can. And I have a couple of programs that I help to teach people the program itself to help them start to build a paradox mindset. Because, gosh, the world is so polarized and it's so divided. And it's such rapid change and things are moving so fast. You can't help but take a side, and sometimes that blocks us from being able to find the resolution that we're looking for in terms of how to bring the world together in a way that allows a higher level of functioning to happen. So that's my thing. I kind of am a big paradox crazy person around helping people sort of understand what that is and how it applies to being healthier and happier and calmer in today's world. That's kind of what I am about.
Does this idea of paradox that you are working from, does it operate on a spectrum? Like the being two ends of the spectrum and the paradoxes are at the two ends of the spectrum, or are they separate things altogether that are in conflict with one another? Or in
The paradox itself, rather than being here or here, is actually positioned up here. So you see that there's opposites or opposing forces, and you understand when you can look at it from up here that there's a pattern and a rhythm to them, that they're actually one organic, harmonious whole that moves back and forth between one end to the other end. And if you can perceive it that way from a little bit higher up, like here's the craziness back. I love this and I want to do this and I want to, we experience it as a tug of war on the inside,
right, right.
or, our mind has two different viewpoints on this, so it's confusing. So when you can get a paradox mindset, you learn how to understand this dynamic and how they actually work together. And then when we do that, we can get some insight into a new innovation and collaboration that can occur between what seems like two totally opposite things, which they are. But then we get to see how they actually are working together as well. It's quite fascinating, actually. I
Is
mean,
it is it fair to say that the paradox are two sides of the same coin?
yes, it's very fair to say that. And what you're doing in a paradox mindset, if you think of a coin, your great example that you brought up, you've got the two sides, but we also have the rim on a coin. And the paradox mindset positions you on that rim so you can look down and see one side, you can look down and see the other side, and you see the strengths and the weaknesses of both sides. It's pretty funny because almost always the side that I like, I can see the strengths, but I can't really see the weaknesses. And the one that I am not so comfortable with, I see the weaknesses right off the bat, but I don't necessarily see the strengths. So part of what I help people learn how to do is to see both the strengths and the weaknesses of both sides and how they actually complement each other to create the possibility of a new solution, a new perspective, a new insight, a new conclusion or an outcome. Yeah.
When you're working with people, and are you take, and I'm guessing that in this sense, the paradox that you see is a conceptual thing, but for the individual, they're seeing it as something real that is a that there's this opposition within themselves that they're identifying. It may be a person or it may be a job or something in there. What do you find is kind of the most uh, standard or most evident paradox that we experience?
Well, there's so many of them. Control and surrender is one, where we want to choose one and not the other. And when we learn that they go back and forth and that we learn how to go with that flow, you know that term, go with the flow?
Yeah.
One of the things we're seeing is, oh, there's a specific pattern to this flow. It goes back and forth, in a
Uh-huh.
specific direction, in a specific way. So control and surrender is certainly one that people work with. Being alone versus being together, being connected versus being separate, being healthy versus being sick, being happy versus being sad, being rich versus being poor. I mean, they are everywhere, wherever we look. The interesting thing is that nature doesn't seem to have any problem with opposites at all.
Right.
It flows between them, sunrise, sunset, the tide comes in, it goes out, the sand doesn't get all upset about that, the beach doesn't. So we have a lot to learn from our environment, from nature, about how to navigate these opposing pulls. And they still happen in your body. It's just that you're learning how to look at it differently. You have a different way of understanding it. You can't get rid of it.
It
That's one of the things that's kind of key.
is one of the maybe the way to say it is one of the manifestations of this paradox that we tend to feel that our identity is dependent upon of accepting one side or the other rather than finding resolution between the two.
Perfect, deep insight you just articulated, Ed. Yeah, yeah. Mostly we're trained from the day we're born that the way to be happy and how to determine who you are is to build up the positive side of the polarity, whatever you think that is, and work hard to get rid of the negative one. So it's
Uh-huh.
kind of curious. Yeah, because we really do work hard to get rid of what we don't want as opposed to creating what we do want. But either way, we kind of miss the rhythm of it, the flow between the two. And that really does determine our identity a lot. Yeah. Like I'd rather be beautiful than ugly or slender than fat. I mean, hello, and rich better than poor. But both
Yeah.
sides of the coin, I'm afraid, often visit my sense of self, my identity. So there's a lot to be said about how to stop trying to get rid of what you don't like and learn how to become large enough to embrace both.
I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. I see this everywhere I go, and
Yeah.
it's never been talked about here on the podcast. Um,
Oh, okay. I'm
so
first. Yay.
this is a new topic for us, and I'm appreciative of that. But what I find is that it's not so much the affirmation of that positive that becomes the
Mhm.
identity. It's actually the declaration of not being that other thing, which becomes the source of our identity. And the people who represent that become the ones who are my enemies. And that this, particularly in society when we get trapped into a paradoxical mindset, and you see someone who believes something different than you, that they're not just a threat to, you know, the society in general. They're a threat to your own sense of identity, and therefore they become someone you have to really take down or eradicate or something like that. I think that's where I see a lot of the anger and the violence that comes in society is from trying to eradicate the thing which threatens my own sense of identity.
Absolutely. I think that's well put. And it's really obvious right now, given the
Yes.
extreme polarization. We can see it really easily, what's going on. But it's hard. I don't think people oftentimes think of it in terms of their identity. I mean, not consciously, you know, it's just about sometimes it just tell me what you think. It just kind of comes down to I'm right and you're wrong, which is, of course, a real blocker for any kind of peace or camaraderie or collaboration, which is what we need. Do you find that too, that you find that the doors kind of close on that then?
Well, the standard question I ask is, so where did you hear this? How did you come to find this perspective? Who told you this? Why do you believe it? These are the questions I ask because it's not that I'm trying to defend my own side of a paradox, because I don't want to be in a paradoxical situation, a, com- a conflicted paradoxical situation. I'd rather
Yeah.
be in a resolved or collaborative paradoxical situation. But what I find is that people can't tell you why they have found themselves in this position, but they are in this position and they have a very difficult time finding a way out of it.
Yes, and that's kind of what my path is about, and the work that I do is I found a way how to get out of it. And it's not easy to do because you have to sort of retrain your brain and retrain your unconscious mind. But those are my fields, where I've been working for all these years. So it kind of came together. But you wonder where I first ran into this concept. I said earlier that I have a pretty and I have my professional life, and over here I have my spiritual life, and they kind of like go together. So I did a lot of inquiry on both sides, the human side and the more spark of the divine identity side, so that you kind of have two identities. But the first time I ever heard of this idea was from a poem called Verses on a Faith Mind. And it was written by the third Zen patriarch. I was not a Zen person, but I read it and it really struck me in the context of that poem. He said, when you set up what you like against what you dislike, that is the disease of the mind. And at the time, I could only say dis-ease because I couldn't think of the mind as being a disease or having a disease. But it was the dis-ease of the mind. It created that. And then he said the solution to this is to be neither for nor against either. And
Mhm.
I thought, well, I get that intellectually, but how do I do that? How do I, just be neither for one or the other? Because dilemmas put me in a position where I have to make a decision, right? I've got two choices and I got to go one way or the other. And how did I not choose one over the other? So my work has been a lot about exploring that. And one of the things that I looked at to get my answers to some of these questions that we ask was looking at mystic psychology, not their spirituality, but their psychology, because the mystics seem to be the one group of people in our species that are able to demonstrate staying calm and centered and peaceful no matter what comes their way. So I was curious. I went, how do they do that? Because I do not do that. So I began to really study not the spirituality, but the psychology. And as it turned out in this study, it turned out that there were the same seven ideas that showed up in mystic psychology, regardless of their religion, regardless of their age, regardless of their gender, or the time frame that they lived in. So I was using these ideas from mystic psychology to help me get a different way to view paradox, because that was like one of the main things that came up in all of them, is that opposites, was really clear, are not in conflict. They are one organic, harmonious whole. And I thought, well, really? Okay, then how do I navigate that? And that's what I've been trying to learn how to do and how to share with other people, because it's not going to go away. I mean, we all have dilemmas. I mean, I think I read somewhere we have at least, of the 31,000 decisions that we have to make every day, generally speaking, 3,100 of them are dilemmas. Should I do this or should I do that? So it's kind of a big deal, because we're all so caught up in right and wrong. So anyway, that's where I found it. Where did you stumble across this? Just in your own experience with watching people?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, um, from a very early stage of my adult life, I found that I did not fit in any one place. I may be included in the group, but it didn't feel like I fit. That there were things, I think it's my natural way of looking at the world. And if we borrow from say Ian McGilchrist, two hemispheres brain symmetry,
Mm-hmm.
I am much more of a right brain person. So I see a bigger picture. I look at things from a very broad scope. But I have an analytical side to me, but my analytical side doesn't dominate. So the analytical side I think, is where we get trapped into thinking one is right and one is wrong, where
Yeah.
on the on the more synthetic or intuitive side, intrinsic side, whatever that right brain side, we can see how things fit together in some way. So I've gone through my whole life having to sort through not choosing sides, and it
Mm-hmm.
came naturally to me, and
Yes.
and it's a very you provoked me to think about this even more, because I see paradoxes probably very much like you do. I see
Mm-hmm.
them as a representation of something that's whole, different facets of something that's whole, and that if we can
Yeah.
accept that, then it requires us to step out of our own head a little bit and actually see the world in a different way.
Absolutely. I love the way you're describing the way you see it. The right side of the brain embraces this notion a lot easier than the left side.
Hmm.
So a lot of my work is to help the left side get on board, because if you can see a bigger picture, like you're talking about, you get an insight into the connection that's there that you can't see when you're just looking from your analytical side.
Well, what I would also say is that I think, and I want to be careful in what I say, I think for many people, they're um, they're getting trapped in the conflict of a paradox is
Mm-hmm.
thrust upon them by someone, and that they
Mm-hmm.
feel that they either must accept or reject what is being thrust upon them, and that they feel in conflict because they don't know what side to take, and so they choose the one which seems to have the least amount of conflict that comes with it. And so, you can see this in politics. If my circle are
Yeah.
all Democrats, then I'm going to follow the Democratic line. Or if
Right.
I'm a Republican, or you say I'm neither one. So the other side of that is that I think that what we're really are talking about is is the importance of our own agency as human beings, to make our own choices, to make our own decisions, to sort through the differences in the world ourselves and come to our own mind about it, and then feel like we can have our own mind about it without having to kind of comply with some pressure to conform to somebody else's sense of the way the world should be.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is, I think, totally accurate description of what goes on. Because I studied physiological psychology and neuro-linguistic programming, one of the things that I became very conscious of is that at the unconscious level and at the brain level, the primary drive for human beings is to remain alive, to survive. And
Mhm.
in the brain, there's something called, from an NLP perspective, the direction filter. And it tells you whenever you interface with the environment or reality, it's either safe or it's dangerous because it's only looking for physical survival. That's it. So it works great for physical survival because you can look and you go, okay, this is safe. I can go towards it, or it's not safe and I can move away from it. So this works really great for physical survival, but it really sucks for emotional, mental, and spiritual clarity, because this is where you get into the higher levels that you're talking about, where instead of it being an either or choice only, which is what a dilemma really is, as we're taught, it's either this or that. What we want to do is engage in creating a new neural pathway in the brain and a new option in the unconscious mind that doesn't just use physical survival as its sole criteria for deciding to go forward or back. So the way that we do that is develop a both and mindset, which is really what I call a paradox mindset. Instead of going either or, you go, wait a minute, let's get bigger and let's embrace both this side and that side. Life is safe and it's also dangerous. Republicans have something good to say, Democrats have something good to say, and they both have something that doesn't work as well. So we look at both and. So for me, one of the strongest, excuse me, one of the strongest drives in building a paradox mindset or a both and is the fact that the brain, unless it's been developed through time, doesn't have this both and option coded in it. And there has to be a coding in the brain, according to neuro-linguistic programming, for an action to arise or for a perspective to arise. So, really, if you think about it as every decision that we're making emotionally, mentally, and spiritually is still being based on my physical survival. Am I going to live or am I going to die? And that is what makes it so emotionally intense. Does that make sense? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Does that match your experience?
Yeah. So let me give you a story. I told this to someone just the other day, and um, in December of 2019, I went to Kenya for the first time, and I was
Mhm.
going to be a part of a conference, and at the hotel I was staying, one of the other guests, a Dutch woman who was working in Tanzania, was there, and so the two of us decided we would go into Nairobi and go to the marketplace, and we were in the marketplace, and we're walking through, and I'm not a fearful person about anything really, but I became very aware that we were being stalked. We were
Ah,
being followed. And I just mentioned to her, I said, I think you need to know that we're being followed, and I'm going to try to uh, not put us in jeopardy and not put us in a position where they could attack us and rob us, because I think that's what they want to do. So we walked a little
okay.
ways, and I said, let's turn down this alleyway. And went down this alleyway, and we went into an electronics store, glass front electronics store, and we started looking at things. And the two guys that were following us went by, and then I watched them come back, and I think they saw us, and I think they thought
Mhm.
that we would come back out and come back out to the street. Well, we went out and we went down to the end of that alley and went down another alley and eventually found us a taxi cab to take us back to our hotel. But what I didn't hear, I was aware, my what are this sensitivity to danger was happening, but it wasn't
Yeah.
fearful. And nothing happened to us, and so we could celebrate and go back and have some dinner together and be ready for the conference.
It has its place for sure, and really to sense danger without the fear is one of the great things. So that was a wonderful experience that you just shared.
Yeah,
I think for me, when I was in India a lot, because I went there numerous times, lived in an ashram there for a while and taught there some of this NLP stuff. But the first time I was there, I was terrified, really. I mean, I was fearful, but I was very aware that I felt I was in danger, which was the first clarity that I had about this thing that we're talking about. Because in India, it's very natural for all the young guys to hook arms together and walk down the street. I mean, what are all those guys with their arms, arms together? Why are they walking so close behind us? And why are, and I realized, well, that's the way the culture works in
at their
India,
social
so
life.
I got used to it, right? It's fascinating to see. I have one little story to share, which I've told on other things, but it's kind of interesting. I was in the ashram in Pune, India, and I was sitting on a wall outside the ashram, where it was all the normal things that happen on a back street in India were going on. But I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, well, here I am in the birthplace of spirituality, so to speak. And I'm still just as screwed up as I've always been. And I'm just as unhappy as I've always been. So I'm really missing something here, right? And as I was sitting there bemoaning my state and all the money I've spent to get to India, etc., this beggar comes walking down the street and he has his hands out, he's begging for alms, and he has no shoes on, his clothes are in tatters, and he has no teeth at all, but he's smiling. And his eyes are like, how you see some people's eyes sometimes, they're just bright, they just shine. And he had this smile on his face. And I thought to myself, I could never, ever have a smile on my face in that circumstance. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah,
And as I was watching him, I suddenly got an insight into why I was so unhappy. And it was like it appeared just like this neon sign above my head. I had been defining happiness because I was really a happiness junkie. I was defining happiness as the absence of all unhappiness. So it didn't really matter how happy I was because the minute it changed into something different, I got unhappy. And I think that moment really opened my mind to the paradoxical way of looking at things because I had this example in front of me, one that I couldn't at that time even imagine being in. But it really started the whole thing for me of understanding how I have to accept, if I want to be happy, I have to accept how to navigate unhappiness as well. And then the happiness that I can find is going to be almost like one level up, right? I'm going to be, instead of being here with this dilemma, this struggle, I'm going to be up here and I'm able to see, oh, this is just life. This is life in duality, a world made of opposites. And that opening really helped me a lot I mean, do you ever think of this, of the terrain that we live in as dualistic, as duality?
yeah, I certainly do, and it's interesting how many people want to want to see the world in a non-dualistic way. But
Yeah.
I do see it as very dualistic, and that's, I think, is paradoxical. I think that
Yeah,
what
that
you're
is a
describing, it
paradox.
captures that, and it
Yeah.
means that there's a choice that we have to make. Um, let me ask you this, because I think that I I'm moving. I constantly feel like I'm moving towards looking at the negative side of this, of the negative approach to this idea, because so many people do. Um, and and I'm wondering how you perceive people's sense of being victims of this or victims of something in their life, and how that sense of being a victim becomes the way they look at these dualities or these paradoxes that emerge in our life?
Mhm. Well, the fundamental strategy that we are taught is you have to choose the one that is the best one for us, because we're all taught we live in duality, because we're taught from the you're supposed to be good and not bad, you're supposed to be right and not wrong, you're supposed to be smart and not stupid, you're supposed to be kind and not cruel, so we grow up with this really big idea of, there's a right way to be and a right way to never be. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think that basic idea has to be challenged. And one of the things that I learned in looking at mystic psychology, the first thing of those 7 things, the first thing was everything is impermanent. That was the first thing that it was like impermanence sat at the head of every decision making, gathering. Right. And if everything is impermanent, then nothing beautiful, wonderful, gorgeous is going to stay that way. It's going to change into the opposite. But I didn't know that until I started looking at mystic psychology. I never had the idea, the understanding that if you're too good and all the time you be good, what's going to happen is the desire to be bad is going to arise. You're going to want to break the rules and all that kind of stuff. And that it's not necessarily about you, it's the way nature works in human beings. So that was really helpful to me in understanding why we cling so to being one thing, right? And it's not okay to be the opposite. And yet, when I sit in my office over the last 40 years with people, everybody knows they have the opposite experience inside of them, but they don't know what to do with it. They don't know where to put it, how to make sense of it. And until really I got into paradox, I didn't really know how to help people somewhat. You just end up reframing something. And paradox really allows you to do what you were talking about naturally, is stepping into your right brain and seeing a bigger picture. One of the things that one of my students always says, I have to move to the balcony in order to be able to see the paradox,
Oh, I
or we
like
have
that.
another thing of, terraces, you go up to the higher terrace, because down in the lower one, that's where the fog settles, right? So you want to climb up and see from the highest terrace. And we aren't taught that. So I think part of what this age is giving us the opportunity to develop, because of the extreme polarization, is how to be able to climb above it and develop a new way to deal with navigating duality. First of all, seeing it, and then, what's a better way to walk through it than trying to deny its existence or get rid of half of it. So that's kind of where I am with that, because I think it's just a natural thing that we do. We don't want to be the darker side, but yet we all have a darker side, which we all know, but we don't have the skill set to actually face that sometimes, or what to do with it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I really do. And I think a lot of it has to do with how we're raised, and if we're
Yeah.
raised with with a parent who is afraid that we will not achieve what we need to achieve, or that will be a disappointment or an embarrassment or whatever it may be, then it really saddles us with an emotional burden that is almost impossible to get rid of without some sort of intervention. And
Yes.
I've as I've re- I have these conversations all the time, and I've reflected a lot on my life, and I go back to my grandmother's admonition to me when I was 12, and she said,
Uh-huh.
"You may do anything you want, but do not bring shame to the family name." And
Oh,
what they gave me was kind of a carte blanche to try things, and when you try things, what you learn is that there's a consequence to your actions. And you learn the
yeah.
positive consequences and you learn the negative consequences, but you learn them and you begin to put together your life so that you're constantly moving towards the more positive consequence or whatever that may be. And I think that's a way of managing these two yin and yang, dark and light sides of us, where we're trying to manage what it is that we want to be.
I think that's absolutely so true. We all want to be the best we can be, whatever that might be. Sometimes we don't have any idea what that might look like. But oftentimes I find that the negative side, the thing that I don't like about myself or that I don't want to share with others or whatever, has in it something that I need in order to be the person that I want to be. I've just been taught that it's so negative that I shouldn't even bring it out at all. It should just stay hidden away. And that can be a tough challenge. From my years of working with people, people often come in with that. They know that there's something in what that they need in what they're doing, but whatever they're doing, thinking, or feeling, they've been told is not acceptable. So
So do you work with uh, say groups of people like couples or say married couples and things like that? Do you work or do you just work with individuals? What's your practice look like?
over the years, I've worked with both. Mostly, I've worked with individuals. Couples are a little harder because they each carry a polarity.
Right.
So if they're open to that idea, that it's not just internal, but they have to dance with each other in these different headsets. If they're open to that idea, it works great. Working with Paradox works great with people. Sometimes it's not really possible because the polarization, the distance between is so big. My preference is to work with individuals or groups where I teach them the process that I've created over the years for how to live with duality better, how to navigate it and how to develop a paradox mindset. But it's interesting because over the years, and it's almost 50 years of working with human beings, uh, everybody that I've ever worked with, even if they understand paradox and polarities, their unconscious mind is still designed to want one and not the other. It's just curious. So it's like a natural way. It's like a natural thing, and I think it goes back to what I said earlier about the fundamental drive of all human beings is to survive physically, and that without intervention at some other levels, that there's another way to do it. It seems like we remain pretty much caught in that. Um, as evidenced by the political state of our country right now, where everybody's so split.
Yeah. Do you find that what you understand and what you can do with people has an application in businesses and organizations?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think a lot of people are working in organizations to bring in the paradox perspective. And I think that's really great. I'm really not a corporate person. I prefer to work with people who work in corporate one on one
Sure,
so
sure.
that I can work with them as a leader to help them develop this mindset and then help them apply it to their situation. A lot of times, a lot of leaders actually have already begun to develop it naturally because of their circumstances. They've had to make decisions. Something like as obvious as do we take this money and do we put it toward research and development or do we put it towards marketing? And they're used to those kind of really polar opposite choices. And that over time, I found has naturally they've started to develop a different way of looking at decision making when you've only got two options. So, although it definitely has a role, and that's why I like to work with leaders, I'm not really a corporate person. That's not where I've lived. I've lived most of my life as an individual, working one on one with people or small groups. Um, and I've also been, as I said earlier, in a deep inquiry into spirituality, which sometimes has a real powerful role to play. I've found with corporate leaders, if it's approached in the right way for them, because we all know that we're more than we think we are. Somewhere in us, we know that. I mean, we're born, we live, we die, so we ought to make sense of that somehow. And so I think I always ask people, how do you make sense of that? The question I actually ask is, how do you make sense, or how does it make sense to you that we're on this rock floating in the middle of space for a short period of time? We're here, then we're gone. That's how I ask people what that dimension in their journey is. And the answers are very interesting sometimes. Some people have no interest in the question, I never think about that. And other people have rather intricate understandings and philosophies that they use to guide them in their everyday lives. It's interesting.
Okay, here's my last question, and we can go forever on this one because I think it's at the heart of why people may want to bring some resolution to this. But as you look at as you look back over your years of experience,
Mhm.
uh, and then as a result, you look forward, where do you find hope for the future? I mean, and then particularly in the application of the ideas that you have, how do you see that from a perspective of having maybe some way of saying, I hope that this is something that we can learn, and maybe this is how it may happen. I'm really seeking to understand how you view the future and whether you have hope for the future because of what you know.
It's an interesting question. I do have hope for the future of the individual. I really have no idea how the world is going to turn out because, societies have lived many, many times in our history and they have all passed away, you know.
Yeah.
So, a society is built on individuals. That's what makes a society. So I have hope for the continued development of clarity that the human mind wants. It wants to be clearer and understand that word, that scary word called truth. And the more that we understand the variety of truths that there are, psychological truth, scientific truth, all kinds of truths. But then there's the absolute truth or universal truth, which is defined by having everybody agree on that, right? There is no disagreement about it. Is that possible? I don't know. Do I have hope? Sure, because I think there's a magic and a mystery to being human. I mean, who knows why we're here, what we're doing, what we're here to learn. We all have ideas, but for me, I think we're in a perfect environment for the emergence of a paradox mindset. There is so much extreme polarization, so much. It's like a circumstance ripe for a new beginning. It's ripe for it. It's just waiting there inside of those of us that have some access to their right brain as well as their left brain. And the more people that I can reach out and touch with my work, to help them build that a little bit so they can work with it. Because I haven't had anybody who's actually gone through my trainings who hasn't said to me, this has changed my life because they're using it. They know how to use it. They have to practice it, of course, like all things. We have to practice to build the neural pathway and all that. But I do have hope for the evolution of our consciousness. You know, I don't know about the species, but I do know about the individual. I watch an individual's consciousness grow, their awareness, that picture get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then the little tiny things down on the first terrace or the balcony below don't seem quite as important. So they don't get quite as much energy or focus. But because you've got a bigger picture, you can see how to handle these things differently than we've been able to handle them in the past. So I have a lot of hope in that we have a really radical circumstance out of which the paradox mindset can bloom if people begin to see that there's another way besides the way we've been doing it. I don't know. So yeah,
Exactly.
I have
I
hope.
really, I really
How
agree
about
with
you?
that.
Good.
I see that I'm going to create a paradox here between the human being and the institution. And I don't think
Yes.
the institutions are survivable under their present configuration.
Yeah.
But I think humanity is at a stage of growing, flourishing. I've seen this over the last 3 or 4 years. I see
Yeah.
this in my conversations with people on the podcast. I have never been more hopeful about the future than I am right now. I don't
Yeah.
think I think we're going to go through hard times with the failure of these organizations, But I think people are growing into a point of preparedness today. Okay, we're going to take this on. We're going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And
Yeah.
I think what you offer is one of those ways of seeing things that can be really helpful for people who need to have a way of bringing the pieces of their life together into something that's whole so that they can see the bigger picture and be able to say, this is where I want to go and this is what we need to do. And come join me as we go do this together.
Yeah, that bigger picture, it's a different perspective. It's really, I always talk about the angle of vision that you're looking at the circumstance from. What is it? Is it big enough? Do you have a big enough angle of vision? Is it high enough? Does it penetrate the patterns that are there so that with clarity so that you can see what
Yeah,
they are and
yeah.
realize they're not working the way you want? It's very cool. It's been so fun talking with you, Ed.
Well,
It's
this has been
nice to
great.
meet somebody else.
And thank
Yeah,
and,
thank you.
and thank you for being here. And um, look forward to maybe talking again as time
Anytime.
brings that about. So
Anytime, my friend. Mhm.
so to the audience, to all who are watching, um, let us encourage you to physically step back from where you're standing or sitting and seek to understand the polarities that exist in your life. Can we use that word? Polarity? That
Yeah.
represents a paradox between two things which you feel like you must make a choice about and decide, I'm not going to make that choice. I'm going to live with both of them and see what works. And if it doesn't, maybe you need to be in touch. Leave a comment, leave a question. Let us know who you are. Let us know whether this is helpful. And if it is, then good. If you need some help, then you know where to find some help. So I thank you for watching. Always appreciate your support and your engagement with my guests. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.